Welcome back, AP Psychers. In today's video, we are going to overview Diana Baumrind's parenting styles, as shown in Essential Task 9.3. This is the very last box of the 9.3 Essential Task, and it is a series of terms that has a high probability of being on the AP exam. Every time that we have a unit test, in-class unit test, and then even sort of the at-home FRQ style that we did for Unit 8, I include parenting styles. It's been a frequent FRQ bullet, or at least one of the 4 parenting styles has been a frequent FRQ bullet. At the very end of the concept map, beyond the text of the terms, you would find a visual that looks something like this. And if you didn't take a chance to look at it, hopefully you have an opportunity to see it here. If you take a look here, when we look vertical, the two extremes are highly responsive and then low response. We'll start at the top. A parent that is highly responsive is there for the child's needs. That could look like just giving the child whatever they want. That's technically highly responsive. But that also could look like a parent who's willing to hear things out, try and understand their child's perspective, listen about their issues, and then decide to make a decision with that perspective in mind. Low response is a parent who's simply not there. They're not necessarily there to provide basic needs. They're not there to provide emotional needs. The parent is what we call low response. If we go horizontal, on one end we have high demand and then low demand. By demand, I mean, is this a parent that has high expectations for their child? Is this a parent that expects chores to be done in a very methodical way, on time, always asking for the room to be cleaned, things like that? That would be highly demanding, or a parent that exhibits high demand. The other end of the spectrum is low demand. A parent who lets you do really whatever you want without having to do chores, without having to do any type of responsible actions in order to receive rewards. Just kind of do what you want. There's no demands. Whatever at school, whatever at work, do whatever. Sometimes you see, just as we go on here, the word highly responsive called warmth. So sometimes you could see this called high warmth or low warmth. I don't anticipate that being in an FRQ, but it is a synonym of the word responsive. What we're going to do now is pick the corners and identify which parenting style falls into those extremes. So when we talk about a parent that is highly responsive but highly demanding, we talk about a parenting style called authoritative. I am going to capitalize the last portion of this. It's for a mnemonic that I'll describe at the very end. Authoritative parents are parents that are highly responsive but highly demanding. So they expect that you do well in school, they expect that you get a job, they expect that you maintain your chores and things like that, but they'll also hear you out. If you have an issue that you're going through, whether that's in your personal life, at work, at school, they're highly responsive to those needs and are generally there for your basic needs in general. That would be what we call authoritative. If we go down here, though, and we look for high demand with low warmth, we're going to find the opposite, called authoritarian parenting. These words look similar, but we'll talk about mnemonics in just a second. Authoritarian parents are parents that are highly demanding, but they do not provide you with that same degree of warmth. They have what we call low response. They're not really there to hear you out. It's their way or the highway, and that's what we call authoritarian parenting. As a mnemonic, when we look at these, I like to isolate the last 3 letters here, the I, V, and the E, and I use that to connect to the word responsive. That's why I originally wrote responsive and not warmth. I connect the IVE to the IVE at the end of responsive. That way, when I see this term, I know that this is the one that's highly responsive. That differs from the one down here, authoritarian, that obviously ends with a T-A-R-I-A-N. To me, there's a few words that this reminds me of. One, if you're from the historical perspective or want to approach this from the historical perspective, authoritarian leaders and dictators are obviously people that are highly demanding, with not a lot of warmth. The other way is if you're familiar with the word draconian, that I-A-N at the end of draconian, and the I-A-N at the end of authoritarian, I always connect that as well. So there's a few ways to differentiate these two confusing pairs. These words look very similar, but they have 2 very different outcomes and have 2 very different set of criteria. What's important, though, beyond just knowing what each of these are, is some of the questions that you could see. Generally speaking, the authoritarian parenting style correlates to independence in the child and really good and strong social skills. So we're talking about a child that has good self-reliance, of course independent, can do things on their own. And again, it's just correlational. Correlation, again, is not causation, but it is an important correlation to note. Children that grow up in an authoritarian parenting style tend to, when they grow up, really respect and listen well to authority. which you would probably anticipate, but they tend to have some deficiencies overall in social skills. So I'm just going to write less social skills. And again, it's correlation. I'm not trying to put this information up here and you reflect on what environment you grew up in and try and figure out what that means for the rest of your life. Correlation, again, is not causation, but there are some correlations that Baumrind found when she looked at the different parenting styles. On the other end of the spectrum, we're going to talk about highly responsive, but on the other end, low demands. We're going to call that permissive. Permissive parents basically let you do whatever you want. They're there for all your needs, but they're not really demanding. I don't care if you clean your room. I'll still get you that new bike. I'll still bring you out to the restaurant. You'll get whatever you want for your birthday. All the response that you want, none of the demands. The bottom corner is when we have the low on both ends. It's what we call neglectful. Neglectful parents are, of course, no demands. They're not there to tell you to go to school, to do your homework, nothing like that. But they're also not responsive to your needs. These two obviously are going to correlate to some of the more negative behaviors, things like delinquency perhaps, things like difficulty understanding and reacting to authority when you age. And again, it's just correlation. Correlation is not causation.